Okay, excuse me, a few ants on the table here. This is the first lecture for the week 11 series, and so what I'm going to do in this one is basically go through the theory of the vertebrate body plan and then talk about its relevance in terms of reflexes, and start with basic reflexes. In the actual lecture I'll talk about the more complex forms of reflexes and then also talk about the protection of the spinal cord. So here we go. One of the things that I emphasised last week and is true again this week is the maintenance of mechanisms within the body to provide structure and organisation. That once complex organisms identified or developed ways to become the shape they are, genetic, biochemical pathways were set up, and a lot of that has been maintained. And we can see some of that in both our structure and also our genetics. And on the basis of it, we can see, if we look around, all sorts of animals, particularly invertebrates, are segmented. So here we have a fruit fly. Its back end has obviously got segments to it. It's got a region which is differently organised and then a head. And so that when we look at an invertebrate's body, we can see regions that are repeating. It becomes more obvious if you look at something like an earthworm. Again, very obviously, vertebrates will display some degree of segmentation. If you think about a snake, sorry if I put a bad image in your mind, it's got many ribs because the thoracic region has been repeated. And so what's actually happened is our basic body plan has been developed from the segmental original arrangement. And we can see that if we look, as I say, at the genetics. One of the complexities about how things develop is when things are timed and how they arranged spatially amongst the animals. So when does the head develop, when does the bit below, etc. And studies in invertebrates identified a set of genes which are called the Hox genes. Now these three diagrams basically show the same thing. This is the Hox genes which are on chromosome 3 of the fruit fly gene, and this is a map of the segments. There are 15 segments within a fruit fly, and the colour coding shows when those genes become effective. So this one, labial gene, is active in the first segment, the head segment. As we go down the chromosome, we also go further back in the developing larva, and so this abdominal B gene is, not surprisingly, expressed at the back end of the fruit fly. So what this gene set does is it turns on sequentially. So this gene is turned on, then that one, then that one, then that one. So it's almost like a clock controlling the running and development of the organism. And then as each gene is turned on, it also becomes active in different parts of the organism. Some of them, like this Antennapedia gene, is active throughout the whole of the body of the organism, but it has its main function at the top end. The diagrams down here basically show the same thing on a more realistic view of the segments of the fruit fly, so they're curled up. So we can see the head ones, and then as we go down, Antennapedia through the whole body, abdominal A and then abdominal B. So basically these genes are controlling the segmental organisation in invertebrates. What is surprising and exciting is that these self-same genes were found in mammals. The genes are so similar that you can take a fruit fly gene and put it in the right place in a mouse embryo and it will create the same structures. Our complexity is recognised by the fact that on mammals, instead of it all being on one chromosome, we actually have 4 sets of HOX genes, so that they're running different components, 4 sets on different chromosomes. So using the structure I was talking about last week of genes moving and being copied across chromosomes, this set of genes has been copied 4 times within the human genome. Within that set, as we see in the fruit fly, there are 8 genes in the set. In humans, there can be up to 13 in the set. So not only have the sets been duplicated, but within each HOX set, they have been duplicated and copied across. They're also in the same order and they function in the same order. So in this fruit fly, again using that colour coding, green is doing the head end of the body, the mauve is doing the first limbs and the wing, and then you go down to the posterior ones. Within the human, the mammal, the same thing occurs. The green ones are turned on first in the head end, separately in the spinal cord and the mesoderm, which is the connective tissue. The ones from posterior are also active in the limbs as well. But it's the same factor, the sequencing from the neck down is controlled by those same genes. And you can look at the organisation of the gut and where you move, for example, from the stomach to the small intestine, a different set of HOX genes suddenly become more prominent, or the next gene can become as prominent. So it's looking after that segmental arrangement, and it occurs in humans. You'll notice, and I think I'll mention again, that the head has developed separately from the HOX genes. So this is an indicator of the more advanced nature of the mammals, that while our body uses the same genes, we've got separate genes which are controlling our head and our brain development. But it's that conservation. Another thing that tells us that we have this segmental nature is the basic anatomy. In the fetus, these are 2 pictures of fetal development, and a significant structure which is obvious on both of them is these block-like structures. These things are the somites, and they're going to develop into the vertebra, but also the muscles for each segment. And these blocks actually act in very similar ways to the segments in invertebrates. Don't want to go into details, but there's segments split and joined together at various stages. The somites do the same thing because they are controlled by the same genes. So our embryology shows our segmental nature. And if we think about the fact that we are called vertebrates, a significant feature therefore is our vertebral column. That is a thing that defines us as vertebrates, and when you look at it, the vertebral column is obviously segmental. We have cervical vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, each repeated, and the neural components, the skeletal components, and the muscular components at each level are repeated. It's most obvious when we look, for example, in the thoracic region, where we have a vertebra with a rib coming off and the intercostal muscles, repeated 12 times down through there. Some animals will have 13 ribs, and as I said, with a snake, those segments have been repeated and repeated to give it its length. From that basic segmental arrangement, we get some things that mess it up, where the arms come out, the arms develop separately, and the nerve supply, for example, messes that up. And as I said, the head develops totally separately from the arrangement that we see in the body. So what we're going to look at is that individual basic arrangement as a basis for our understanding of anatomy. And what I might do there is pause, save this video, and then look at the segments as a separate section, next section.